depth, organizational transformation, Bane. So it is a warm welcome from all of us to Preet. And one particular rule I want to tell to everybody: post your questions on the chat window, so we will be able to answer all the questions by last 15 minutes. Yeah, and that's from our side. And kindly post your questions. So I'm repeating this for any kind of clarifications. It will be taken by last 15 minutes. And it's over to you, Preet. Can you please start? Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjan. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. This is Preet here. Just to give you a quick introduction, I'm an Agile consultant. I help organizations with their Agile transformation. I associate myself with various organizations, either as a trainer, consultant, or a coach, based on based on how far they are into the journey. From a training standpoint, I am a professional Scrum trainer, and I'm licensed to provide professional Scrum Master trainings from Scrum.org. I'm an SPC, and I also conduct SAFe trainings. I also, majority of the times, I am working with organizations as a consultant, working closely with the teams and helping with the transformation. Currently, I'm associated with Siemens Healthcare, and I'm helping their modality teams with their transformations. Modality is the various kind of scanners that are there. So I work with few of the scanners team and then help them with their transformation. I come with a total of close to 20 years of industry experience, all of the experience being in IT. So I have played various roles within the software industry as a trainer, a developer, tester. Then I've moved as a test lead, test manager. And when I had decided to come out of the corporate world, the biggest employer was HP, and within HP we had another division, and I was there as the global head of quality with a primary focus on transformation from traditional software development to an agile way of delivery. I have experience working in small startups, because I've worked with startups, couple of startups, both of them India-based startups, and also HP would be the biggest organization that I've worked with. I come to HP as part of their autonomy acquisition, and I was responsible for the quality of entire autonomy, which had a market capital of $8 billion at the time of acquisition. And if you're thinking if this is the same autonomy which was the Bloch acquisition done by HP, yes, it is. This is where HP did a $5 billion write-down. And trust me, I really didn't make much money out of it anyway. It was just an answer even there. So having said that, today I would like to talk about the leadership debt and how it would be the organizational transformation way. So just to kind of start off with, I think all of us here, one thing that all of us agree with is that we are living in a VUCA world, right? It's a world which is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and it is the rate of change that the industries and the businesses are facing today is far too high compared to what the businesses have experienced ever in the history. So VUCA is again something that we have borrowed from the military world, but then it is equally applicable to today's business. Yeah. So this is one part, and one of the consequences of being in a VUCA world is that the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company today is down from 60 years in the 1950s to about 15 years, and it's fast declining. All right. This is valid data which is available on the internet. KOSCD, CNBC, plenty of organizations have a lot of write-up around how the life expectancy of a Fortune 500 company is coming down. At the current rate, if things don't change, what we are saying is by 2030, we are going to be much less than 10 years of life expectancy. So an organization, by the time it's listed as a Fortune 500, to not being a legal entity anymore. When I say not a legal entity anymore, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's gone out of business. It could just mean another company has taken it over, maybe just an M&A kind of a thing activated, but that particular organization, which was a Fortune 500, it does not have an existence anymore. All right. So this is the world that we are living in today. So responding to change today is not a choice anymore. Responding to change has become a requirement by the organization to an extent that it is a requirement to be alive. Right. So that's the reason why I think in the last 10 to 15 years, we really see a lot of focus from organizations around the agile way of software delivery. And even though I'm stressing on agile way of software delivery, any business which is driven by digital is coming under the purview of the software development that I'm talking about. So agile definitely has emerged as the way to respond to change. And if I were to give it a very simplistic and oversimplistic view, agile, it is all about defining small pieces of work, achieving them, and validating and improving the generated value and also the way it was created. Okay. So this is the oversimplistic view of the 4 values and 12 principles that agile is all about. And when an organization is trying to be agile, most fundamentally, what we are trying from a doing part is what I have tried to capture here. Define small pieces of work, you achieve them in shorter time span, validate and improve the generated value as well as the way it is created. So if this was what agile was supposed to do, one of the things that we see today is that close to 80% of all organizations are saying they are at or below a still maturing level. Okay, because the reason why I think this is concerning is, over the years, the data that you're seeing in front of you is from the 12th state of Agile by version 1, and this is the 12th year that we are doing, and at the end of 12 years, we are saying 80% of all organizations which have undertaken the agile journey are still maturing. So we are talking about decade of investment into moving away from a traditional way of development to an agile way of delivery, but 80% of them are still maturing. Right? This is definitely a concern because what we're talking in terms of is millions of dollars of investment, tens of hundreds of consultants, and the entire organization undergoing this. Right? So this is where we are. And if you were to really look at as to why, or what are the challenges experienced when adopting and scaling agile, sorry, the top 3: organizational culture at odds with agile values, general organizational resistance to change, inadequate management support and sponsorship. So if you really look at it, it is primarily revolving around 2 major aspects: the organizational culture and the management support around it. right? When you say gentle organizational resistance to change, it could also be interpreted as a way wherein we have not been able to convince the organization the requirement and the importance of the transformation itself, right? Because all the data that I presented initially, I think one key driving factor is the life expectancy of organizations, right? Because if you're working in a company and you're saying the life of that company is, today is about 15 years, if you're working for a Fortune 500, and over a period of time, the life expectancy is coming down, right? So which is definitely not a good indicator either for the organization or for the people working in it. Having said this, what we are still seeing is about 46% of the challenges are faced because of a resistance to change, right? If the very existence being questioned is still not able to solve the organizational resistance, I think this has got to do with both the culture as well as the management and the leadership of the organizations. Yeah. But then what we usually don't look at is, the Gallup study, which says that the 2017 study says 53% of employees are not engaged and 17% are actively disengaged. So what we are saying is, even without the Agile coming into the fore, whatever culture that we had, whatever was the management that we were trying to do, right, was not sacrosanct. So if you were to really look at it, so is the resistance to change because the organizations felt that they were doing fantastic? When I say organization, I'm talking about the people who are working in the organization. It is not that people are saying, no, we have been creating value all along and we're pretty happy doing it, right? Because 70% of the employees are not engaged and 17% within that are actively disengaged, right? So the sign of an not engaged employee, they come to office, do just what is required to float, and then they go back. So basically, you cannot expect too much of commitment, ownership, at that level. So I'm not even going to talk about innovations. And actively disengaged are people who are literally cribbing about it and creating a toxic environment for the rest of the employees that are in there. So the 17% are people who are likely to jump at the first opportunity, and 53% are maybe not actively looking, but yeah, they would also do the same if given the right opportunity. So an organization today, and these numbers, looking at the other remaining part, which is about 30%. Yeah. So what we are saying is, in an organization, about 30% of the employees are who are actively engaged. So again, if we were to look at it, 2016 Gallup study said it's only about 13% who are actively engaged, and the remaining part is just engaged. So if you literally look at it, an entire organization is being run using about 30% of the workforce, and the remaining 53% supporting them. Right. So what you have right now is a baggage that the organization has been carrying, which has about 70% of something close to dead weight, and a requirement that you have to respond to change. Right. So now we are dealing with what I would like to call as an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. Yeah. So can you squarely blame everything on the agile transformations as the problem? Possibly not, right? Because the base on which we are working currently is also not a very strong foundation. You have about 30% of the employees who are engaged, of which about 13 are actively engaged. And when you talk in terms of agile transformation, you're talking in terms of cross-functional, which basically means you're going to cut across multiple functional units. And if you were to look at it from a pure mathematics standpoint, chances are every cross-functional team will have about 30% engaged forces, right? And each team that has been created are, I'll speak more from a Scrum perspective. So if you are having multiple Scrum teams, each Scrum team is expected to create value at the end of every sprint, right? So, and majority of the organizations that I've worked with kind of follow the guideline from the Scrum guide saying, 3 to 9 people in a Scrum team. So what you're saying is, just for easy math, let's say 10 people in a team, 30% of that is about 3.3 employees. Let's take it as say 4 employees. 4 out of 10 are actively engaged, and the remaining 6 are not engaged, and about 17% of them are actively disengaged. And you're trying to create value at a short span. Right. So this is why I say the situation that we are facing is something where an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. So this is where I was starting to think this was the time that we really revisit what we call culture, leadership, and management. So if you were to really look at how the traditional way we look at leader, right? So I'm just pick this from dictionary.cambridge.org. So leader is a person in control of a group, country, or a situation. And how do we define a manager? The person who is responsible for managing a company or a department of a company or a store. Right. So now, if you were to really reflect back on the organization that you talk or you have worked earlier, and really look at it and look at the team that was being referred to as a leadership team. Yeah. So if you were to reflect on that and see, even though we call them the leadership teams, did we really have leaders, or did we have more of managers? Right? Because the employee engagement of data, I'm just taking that as an example. This is not changed over the last few years, right? So if we really were having some kind of a leadership capability, chances are there would have been a lot of investment in terms of employee engagement and trying to bring it up. Because irrespective of the delivery mechanism, be it the traditional way of delivery mechanism or an agile way of delivery, I think one of the key factors which can never be ignored is the people, right? In the end, an organization, I think, is only as good as its people. So now, if you have not really invested in identifying what's really the cause of the disengagement in that particular organization or given context, and if you have not been working on it, I think it's more about a person who's responsible for managing the current status quo. Okay, so I've inherited a team, or possibly I have inherited a business unit. So this is where we stand, and as a manager, you're responsible for managing that particular department or managing the status quo of whatever is it that you have inherited, right? And so this is where I'm thinking we really need to take a step back and then start reflecting on. So I'm just trying to quote Simon Sinek here. I'm sure most of us here have heard of Simon Sinek. He is one of the biggest leadership and motivational speakers that we have today. He runs an organization called as Start With Why. And he's from an American defense organization, and he helps. He works with the leadership at an organization level. So What he says is leading is not the same as being the leader. Being the leader means you hold the highest rank either by earning it, good fortune, or navigating internal politics, right? So I'm sure all of us have had experienced this kind of a leader. I'm sure there are people who have been really capable of it, and some people have just been lucky to be in the right place at the right time, or who are really good at navigating organizational politics, right? So that's a leader, which basically means even though the intent is to lead people, this is again looked upon as a position of authority. Leading, however, means that others willingly follow you, not because they have to, not because they are paid to, but because they want to, right? So, because chances are, even if I were to ask you to, take a minute and think about, any leaders, and not necessarily from the IT or an organization. If you were to really reflect and see what a leader means to you, or who in your mind would come up as a leader, chances are they were not really people who were managing things. These were people who were inspiring people to take actions, right? So I think this is where we need to really start the shift from, right? How to move from a leader to a person who is leading. And so the intent right now is bringing the focus back to organizational transformation from an agile perspective. With all this data, engagement, don't you guys think this should have been the first step that we address? Yeah, because how you really think you can motivate 70% of your disengaged employees? And for a minute, let's take a look at motivation itself, right? So when you say you're motivating somebody to take action, it basically means motivation is external. Yeah. So traditionally, what do organizations do? You have one day team outing, possibly bash after every release, right? But if you were to think about your own situations, how long did that take you forward? A day, two? I'm not sure, right? I'm sure it varies based on context, but motivation is external, motivation is short-lived. So the first question is it motivation that we should talk about? Because, Zig Ziglar, another management guru, he says, people often say motivation doesn't last. And it's exactly what I did. So he says, well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. Now, when you're dealing with 70% of disengaged employees, and if you think you have to do motivation on a daily basis, yeah, if you were to look at it from a logic standpoint, doesn't sound like a real great ROI. Yeah, because every day you're going to have to do something to motivate the people to do what they are paid to do. So this is where I want to take a look at what Simon said. This is because people do because they want. So now, if they want to, motivation definitely cannot be the answer. So I'm thinking it's more to do with inspiration rather than a motivation. And so when I say if you have inspiration, motivation, I know these are all soft terms, very difficult to quantify. So I'll ask you to bear with me for some more time to see what I'm trying to say here. So if what I have seen in my experience working with many different organizations and within an organization with multiple business units and within a business unit with multiple different teams. In every organization, I've seen teams which are really doing a great job at the transformation. At the same time, I have a lot of teams which are struggling with the transformation. So One key observation that I've had is the leadership team that they're part of the teams, part of the teams which were really successful. Yeah. So if I were to really look at it, these were the people. And even though I'm saying leaders, from an organizational hierarchy standpoint, they could be as simple as, say, a team lead, a team manager, a business head, or one of them, right? So the thing that I've seen is these people, they are doing more than just coming up with a plan and provide motivations daily. What I've actually seen them do is they have a skin in the game and they use empiricism themselves. One way of telling how they use empiricism was not trying to come up with a big upfront transformation plan, right? Okay, no, we are going to spend 6 months. We are going to spend so much of money. These are the teams, and at the end of 6 months, we are all going to be agile. And once this is done, then we get into the implementation mode. That's what I say, waterfalling into an agile way of delivery, because that doesn't work. It was very similar to software development. People are equally complex, right? We use agile when we say, Kenneth network or Stacy's diagram. If you were to look at it, agile comes in handy when you're in the complex domain. And people is one of the dimensions of the complex domain. And I'm sure most of you will agree with me when I say humans are the most complex living organisms. So if you have to deal with complex things, you just cannot use waterfall to manage. So you have to have an agile approach to the agile transformation itself. You have to create transparency. You have to inspect and adapt. So whenever a leadership has been involved, they have their skin in the game and using empiricism themselves, and they go first, right? So what I mean is, these are not managers who take a step back and say, okay, that's the team, that's where you're going to work, and that's the team that you need to make agile. Leaders say, what is it that I need to do to be agile, and what is it that I need to do to help the teams become agile. So this is where the leaders go first. So now, when you are working for a leader who is there with you as part of the transformation journey itself, this gives a lot more focus, a lot more emphasis, a lot more ownership and commitment from the teams to say, okay, you know what? I think he is a believer. He really wants to do it. He is doing it. There is no reason why I shouldn't do it, right? Compare this situation with a leader who says, okay, this is your transformation plan, and comes and gives you a 15-minute pep talk every day as to how you should transform, right? Which do you think is going to be more successful? A leader who is with you, who has his who is ready to dirty his hands and then help you succeed, or the guy who gives you the plan and is trying to motivate you. Yeah. And again, courage, right? Because it is not really fair on my part to say, managers are not doing it. But if you were to look at it, it takes a lot of courage to lead in an uncertain and complex environment. And it is the leader displaying courage that will lead the teams to challenge the status quo. Sorry. So again, this was part of what I was talking as, the leaders go first. So imagine you are working you're working in a team wherein the person who is supposed to be heading the transformation for that team itself is looking at excuses, or have taken a step back, or are disconnected from the actual transformation itself, who is really looking at more from trying to manage the change rather than leading the change, right? So is he really showing courage? So when you see a leader who is hesitant, who is not getting into it, do you really think the teams are really going to challenge the status quo that they are in right now, right? Do you really think the teams would focus on, you know, continuous improvement, or would they rather say, you know what, I'm really not too sure what he really wants. He's talking about transformation, but his presence doesn't really push for the or doesn't show enough encouragement towards transformation. So, right. So what we really need would be, like what Alexander the Great had once said, I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. So if the person who is leading the transformation or who is leading those teams is a courageous leader, the amount of commitment, the amount of presence that the teams brings with themselves is definitely higher. Yeah. And the next question is about engagement. Do we think engagement is important, right? Because an engaged employee is the person who feels that their professional lives are enjoyable, they find happiness in what they are doing, and they actually have fun, being great at what they do, right? So if you were to really map this back to, say, done things right, it's all about, autonomy, mastery, and a purpose, right? Um, so for this particular engaged employees, the line between work and play are blurred. So which basically means they take their profession or they take the work that they are part of, in a way wherein it's equivalent to a play for them. So what I'm trying to say is the commitment, the focus, all of these things are definitely going to be higher, which basically means the productivity that we could get to see towards the end is going to be equally higher. So for the employees to be engaged, don't you think we will also need a leader who's engaged, right? This is not somebody who's sitting on a pedestal issuing commands, right? I'm not talking in terms of the daily delivery or a release kind of a thing, but I'm talking primarily from a transformation itself. Is your leader engaged in the transformation? Is the leader investing time and effort in humanizing the workforce? What do I mean by humanizing the workforce? You stop looking at people as cogs in the wheel, not something that can be replaced, but rather as people, respecting them as people, and moving away from looking at the teams as resources to more as people themselves. Because the moment you change the way you look at things, the perspective changes, and based on that, the approach itself changes. And is he engaged enough to focus on creating a collaborative culture? A collaborative culture. Now, I'm sure you have heard enough and more about collaborative culture, but unfortunately, majority of the organizations that I've worked with or I have audited them on, or what I've talked to, we still have a highly competitive culture that we have, right? Every developer is competing with every other developer in the team. The development team is competing with the testing team, right? And we say, okay, we have created a Scrum team or a Kanban team, and now we are in a collaborative mode, right? And at some level, I also feel it is this kind of the competitive culture that we have set up, wherein we make every developer compete with each other, right? To put it bluntly, when you look at performance appraisal, in the end, possibly at the end of every 6 months or at the end of the year, You sit across the table from your manager, and then you justify your existence. Yeah. So the reason you're going to tell them the reasons why you think you're good, or I would rather want to prove why I'm great and why why I really require that hike and that particular promotion, right? So now, if my individual output is what is being used to measure me, and there is no real incentive to help any other developer become better than me. And so every developer is competing with each other. And now development team and the testing team. I'll just take one statement: when a testing team raises a defect, development team usually says works on my machine, right? So this is where all the fun starts, and then it continues. So no matter how many Scrum teams you create, how many Kanban teams, how many XP teams you create, until and unless your leader is engaged enough to take a look at it from a human angle and has a deliberate focus on providing a purpose to that team and to help assessing value of the outcome both in terms of value creation and the way it was delivered. So until and unless he's engaged to move it from an individual output to a team outcome, I'm thinking we're still going to have the problems that we have facing already. So now I come to a point wherein, so with these three things, the difference in scale of what is actually required in terms of courage, ability to inspire, and creating engagement, and what is actively displayed by that particular leader is what I have termed as leadership debt. And this is purely from a transformation standpoint. Okay, so the basic three things that I think are absolutely necessary for a transformation to complete, irrespective of the framework, irrespective of the delivery model, and what is required and what is actually being displayed. That gap between the gap that you have is what I have termed as a leadership debt. Okay, so I would like us to take a minute and then just ponder as to know how much leadership debt has your organization incurred. Look at it from your team's perspective, based on your context. Look at who's supposed to be in the leadership position, and see how much of courage, how much inspiration, how much engagement is that person bringing to the table. Is this enough? How much of that is actually contributing to the teams not owning it, the teams not really living up to it? Because as I said in the beginning, it is not that we have an engine which is firing on all its cylinders, right? We only have maybe 30%, which basically means one cylinder. If you have a 3-cylinder engine, is what is firing, or maybe a little more than 1 cylinder in a 4-cylinder engine that's firing. So we already have a problem. We have to address that, and then on top of that, we have this urgent requirement of transforming to an agile way of delivery. So, having said this, my next question is: do you really think leadership is it applicable only to people at the top of the hierarchy, or don't you think leadership is not really tied with a title? Right. So, if you are, say, a team lead with a circle of influence of, let's say, 5 or maybe 9 people, right? Whatever is the team size that you have, are you being the leader that you wished you had? Right? I'm quoting Simon Sinek again. So, are you playing the role of the leader that you wished you had? If not, how much of leadership are you as an individual bringing to the table? So even though I started off with the leadership as from an organizational standpoint, leadership doesn't necessarily have to be something that comes with a position. All of us have the capability of being a leader. So the question is, how much do we really want to be a leader? And if we really want to be a leader, how much are we ourselves doing to bring that leadership to the context that we are working in? If you're a manager who is managing leads, who are then managing the team members, yeah, how much of leadership capabilities are you bringing? Yeah, so when, even though I call it leadership depth, my intent was not to demean managers or the senior managers, higher management layer in an organization. I definitely think they also have an equally important role to play, but I don't think it is totally vested on them to do. Right? If you are a Scrum Master, if you are a product owner, or if you're just part of the development team, right? How much of a leadership are you bringing to that table? Scrum Master, yeah, has a bigger chunk because we know Scrum Master has to serve the development team, the Scrum Master has to serve the product owner, the Scrum Master has to serve the organization. As a servant leader, how much of leadership are you bringing to the table is what I would really want all of us to think about, right? So, having said that, I'm I think about 4 minutes early, but this is what I had to, this is what I wanted to talk about, and let's, let's hear from others as well. So, I would definitely like to hear your feedbacks. We will try and do as many in the next, 18, 20 minutes. But if you have more questions or more feedbacks that you would want to do it, you can just mail them over to me at preet.panale@gmail.com. And I'm more than happy to engage in more discussions. So let's get to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Preet, for this webinar. Participants, you guys can post your questions on the left pane where you have a Q&A. I can see a few questions, Preet.
Okay.
Okay, I will raise the question. How are you going to engage the disengaged one? That's one question from.
Okay. So this is going to sound very similar to a consultant answer because I don't see how else I can answer this. See, the disengagement is not something that is generic across all organizations because the amount of disengagement that I have seen in the various teams have a different reason. Okay. So now, if you were to try and move a person from being disengaged to engaged, I would say we really need to know the root cause of the disengagement, right? Because just at a high level to give you a comparison, in a services organization, chances are it could be the pay scale, which in itself has created a lot of disengagement, which may not be the case if you were to compare it to a product company. Now, I'm not making a generalization here. This is just one of the examples wherein one of the services companies with a product company. I'm sure there are services companies which pay more than a product company and vice versa. But now we really need to understand what is the cause of the disengagement. Is it just the kind of work that we do? Because in the end, all of us would really like to work on cutting edge technologies. I would like to learn. I would like to grow. I would like to contribute. right? So from a autonomy, mastery, purpose standpoint, on which of these three scales are we really not doing well? So this is the identification that we would really have to figure out. Based on what we find is what we will have to do, right? But if though the reasons could be different, what I am thinking is, as leaders or as leadership teams, there is a responsibility that lies with us to be doing that, right? Identifying it and having a focus to try and fix it, right? So there is no one answer or one solution rolling out which you can move everybody from disengaged to an engaged. Because as I was saying, you have about 30% of the people within the same context who are engaged, right? So that's something that has to be done on a context by context basis. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it really helped. And the other question is, I think leadership should be applicable across the organization, irrespective of the levels of the organization.
Yes, totally true. So that's what I was trying to use as my concluding couple of slides, wherein leadership doesn't have to be, or leadership should not be based on an organizational hierarchy. It is each individual, That's the reason one of the quotes that I like from Simon Sinek is, how much are you doing to be the leader that you wish you had, right? Chances are you don't have the leader that you would really like to have. But what is it that you are doing to become that kind of a leader? So yes, it is across the organization, and at every level, the circle of influence would be different. But yes, we need to be present. We need to bring our presence as a leader. That's what is really key.
Okay. The next question is, if they are not willing to get engaged at any cost, then what is the solution to such employees?
Nice. So now I think you would definitely have to have a discussion with the right kind of people, possibly the HRD department, or maybe somebody who is responsible, who has some kind of people responsibility. I think you have to talk to them and see what's the next best thing, right? So yeah, I think that's the quick answer. But arriving to the statement that these people just cannot be disengaged should not be that simple, right? So you have the first question is, what are the things that we have tried to move them from disengaged to engaged? You apply empiricism there, bring in transparency, inspect and adapt. Because if you were to really look at most of the people, none of us really go to an office saying, I really don't want to work, right? It is that all of us really would want to work, all of us really want to do our best, but for possibly the culture, possibly whatever is the reason that it doesn't really bring out the best in us. Yeah. So have we made enough investment in terms of trying to move people from disengaged to engaged? Is the long process that I would want us to follow, and at the end of that is where we are coming to a saying that this is totally disengaged, actively disengaged, and they just don't want to change. Maybe they've just given up on the organization. They still think, all the things that you're doing is just lip service. Yeah, you're going to say all of these things, but the next release deadline comes up, you're going to switch back to what you always do, right? So is the disengagement because of you? Then chances are, rather than trying to take an action on the disengaged employee, chances are you should start working on yourself. Yeah. So that was the long answer.
Okay. So if the leadership is supportive, but the team is not
Ah,
supportive. How will you do the transformation?
okay. Again, this is kind of an offshoot of the previous answer in my point. When you say the leadership is supportive and the teams are not supportive, right? So is it because the teams do not feel the leadership to be engaged? So let me put a question back to the entire audience, right? So now if you are in a team wherein the leadership gives a clear direction as to what needs to get done and is willing to give you all the support that needs to get done, but let's not take the teams to be unintelligent people, because if you really look at it, the engineers, maybe he doesn't have enough technical experience or industry experience, but in the end we are all smart people. How long does it take you to figure out what is being said and what is being acted are two different things. The moment you figure that there is a difference in what is being talked about and what is actually being done, what would you align to? Would you rather align to what, in blunt terms, would you rather manage your manager and make sure you are safe and not really go with what is being talked about, or not the things that are written on the wall, but what is actually being displayed? So this is where I have a concern, right? So until and unless you really understand the context, the leadership is, if you're saying the leadership is supportive, but the teams aren't supportive, I think the teams have sensed something. It is not necessarily that the teams are bad or the leadership are bad. There is a disconnect somewhere. So this is the reason why I was talking about the three things. The leaders should be showing the courage to take it. If some leader says, you know what, I'm giving you all the freedom to do whatever you want. You can do waterfall, you can do Scrum, you can do Kanban, but at the end of 3 months, I want this release to happen. From an outside perspective, that's a very supportive leadership. They're giving you the entire flexibility. But what is it that I hear? Dude, I don't care what you're doing. At the end, I need this delivery. Now, if it doesn't work, you're still responsible. So my initial and my first survival instinct is to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to align with what I know he has done in the past, which is the traditional way of doing it. So this could be one of the reasons why it is, you see a disconnect between a supportive leadership, but still having a non-supportive teams. Identifying the gap, identifying the disconnect, again, transparency, inspect, and adapt. Show the courage. Move first. You start doing it.
The next question is, I believe in leadership at all levels, but are they really given the space to behave so by autocratic managers? How to get through this?
So, how many times have we been discouraged from doing more? Yeah. So leadership at all levels. So now, as a developer, do you think somebody is going to come and say, oh, you know what, you cannot write unit tests because that is not the plan and that might increase the quality, right? How many times has anybody been discouraged from doing things better, right? So if to be a leader, I really don't think you need anybody's approval. It is all about the presence that you want to bring to. Because in every team, there are those superheroes. Yeah. Because in a traditional environment, you had to have superheroes who is going to fly in at the moment when the project is at risk and they bring it back on track. All right. So has anybody stopped them from doing it? Right. I know in today's world, the superheroes would really want the project to go off track because that's when they can shine. Yes, but then what is stopping any of us from becoming those superheroes? What is stopping us from creating a group of superheroes? I don't think any manager or any autocratic organizations would really want to do that. Yes, we are focused on delivery. Yes, the tools that we are still using are from the industrial era thinking. I agree to that. But now, even if you were to really look at it, all of the agile adoption that we really see today starts with the team level, right? It's easier to show success at a team level and using that as an example to influence the remaining part of the organizations, right? So I really don't believe that leadership cannot be displayed because of the culture or the structure that the organization has put in. Yeah. But having said that, I really don't make definitive statements. There could be exceptions. If there are exceptions, I would also like to understand why and see and learn more about it. But as of now, this is my belief.
And as a leader, how do I navigate across all the levels? Is there any technique?
How do I navigate across all levels? So I'm assuming it is saying that the transformation is happening at team level, but I really don't have support from the other levels.
Business, yeah.
Yeah, business. So that's a tough nut to crack, right? See, the one thing that we really need to understand is, see, the language that is talked by the team is going to be different from the language that's talked by the business, right? Business really doesn't understand the technicalities, and the technical folks really don't understand the business aspect of it. So there is definitely a difference in language. But having said that, many of the frameworks that are in place kind of try to bring business and the teams working together, right? So that's one part of it, but I definitely agree it is a very hard sell because in the end, business could be looking at what is my quarterly earnings call going to look like, right? So until and unless you can talk the same language and tell them what is it that you're doing is going to help them improve their value delivery, reduce risk, and doing all of those small things, how it impacts the dollar value, right? So are you the right person? Possibly yes, possibly not, but that's the gap that I've always seen between business and technology. And this is how having somebody talk both the languages, or having one person from each place coming together, taking one step towards each other in understanding what's going on is the part. And having said that, majority of the organizations are still struggling by not being able to change the support system, right? The supporting functional units that are required. So there's no single silver bullet or one mantra with which you can solve it. But yeah, this is how it's being handled correctly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Preet. Even I do face the same problem, and it's very, very tough, and we don't have a single silver bullet to.
Yeah. So that's the reason I was saying, all of us have to start using emphasis. Right. No, the first thing is to make an attempt. See what is working, what is not working. With that learning, you try your next experiment. So transparency.
Yeah, you need to jump into the war, and you have to figure out the technique. You are into war,
Yes.
and during the war, you cannot ask what to do. That's what generally I say.
Yeah.
Good. I think we are on time, and it's really nice webinar with you, Preet. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Murugesh.
Yeah.
Thank you, Murugesh. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks, participants. This webinar is recorded and it will be shared across everyone. And thanks a lot for joining our webinar today. Bye.